This is a rough follow-along of me attempting the Trailblazer quest. So this is from Game Dev TV. This is a closed beta that I'm in at the moment, where it's something called Challenge Club, and there's different challenges that have been set out, and they're sort of listed out, and we sort of try and go through and solve the challenges ourselves. I've been through already and done beginner ones myself, so I've come to this Trailblazer quest and decided to try and do a little follow-along video. For this, I'm not going to keep the whole thing recording constantly, otherwise this might be a few hours long. I'm just going to dip in and out as I sort of explain through my process, what I'm thinking, what I'm trying to do, and then record another section about what I've done so far. So as I say, this is the Trailblazer quest with Game Dev TV, and the first challenge is about procedural generation. And quite honestly, I have no idea when I first read this what I'm going to do, how I'm going to achieve this. I've had a few little bright ideas overnight, so I'm going to talk through them in a sec. But the main premise of this challenge, which you can obviously read yourself there, is to procedurally generate new platforms for the player to go on. So I've added in the project, and in a big view this sort of looks like this. And if I just press play already, we have a little fun character here, which we can jump and die by going too far low, and he goes along. At the moment, all these platforms are in the scene already. They are fully in the scene. They're not being generated or anything. If we keep going along, we'll eventually get to a point where we run out of platform and we'll fall off and die. As we can see over here. So if I carried on, get all the way to the end, then we'll run out of platforms. Now, rather than obviously constantly creating platforms for an entire level, we want this to be an endless runner style thing, so we'll need to be procedurally generating the platforms. So my current thinking is to just to try and make this a smaller challenge initially, and then try and expand to something a bit more bigger and better, is I'm just going to probably start a new scene, delete all this fun stuff out to begin with, and just try and procedurally generate this section of platform constantly. I'm thinking if I start the player here, for example, probably get the first few down to begin with, and then set a game object a little bit further off screen, which is going to be an instantiator, so like a spawner of prefabs. And so I'll link it to the player so that whenever the player gets within a certain range, so if the player is less than so far away on the x-axis, I presume, then to instantiate another prefab and move yourself x far along on the x-axis further along here. So when the player then gets to, again, within that range, it will then instantiate the object and move along. So that's my first step of the goal, I think. Once we've got that achieved, then I can start dealing with different prefabs and different sort of up and downs and different sizes and those sort of things. But right now, it's enough of a challenge, I think, for me just to try and get that working. So that's where I'm going to pause the video now. I'm going to have a crack at that, and after a while I'll come back in and we'll see where I've got to. And I'm back. So that's actually worked out not too bad. I'm quite happy with what I've got to in not too long a time. So I duplicated level 1, so make a new level 2, so I had something plain to work in. I stripped everything back, so I just got these 4 platforms. I've coloured them red, so I know these are my starting platforms, so I start out in the world. I have a platform prefab, which is blue, so I know I'm instantiating blue platforms. I made a platform spawner, which lives currently 28.2 on the position in the x-axis in the world. Got the player set up here at 0. I created a script for platform spawner, which is this. So we've got a game object for the platform prefab, so the simple prefab that's being brought in. We know what the player is as a thing as well. We've got a float distance limit and a float player position trigger. So the distance limit is used for trying to move the object along and not sort of trigger if it's within a certain point. So in the start we have player position trigger is the transform.x and the player's distance minus the player's distance limit. So we know the trigger point, the float trigger, is wherever the position of this game object is, wherever the position of my spawner is in the world, minus, on the x-axis should I say, minus this float for player distance limit, which obviously I can change within the game. So that sets this float position of where I want to be triggered from. We then have an if statement, which is saying if the player's position on the x-axis is greater than or equal to this trigger float, then instantiate a new platform at the position and rotation of this object, and then transform.translate and move the whole game object itself that the script's attached to, the spawner, 15f, as I know it's a fixed value, but we're just trying to get things working, on the x-axis across. Player position trigger then equals the new position that we're at minus the distance limit. So we've now got a new number for our player position trigger because we've moved ourselves, so we've recalculated that. Got a couple of debug.logs in the moment just so I can keep an eye on what things were going on. Issues I had, I was trying to do less than or equal to the player position trigger. That didn't work out so well. I was constantly spawning new platforms. I also had my platform spawner in the wrong position. It was minus 18, so things were spawning right up there, and a few little bits like that. But once I sort of got through my little niggly issues, we now have some success. So I'll leave these windows so we can kind of see what's going on in the game world as well. We get to that point, new prefabs. Huzzah! And that just keeps moving along like that. You can see in the console window that yes, things are moving along 15 each time. Great! I'm actually quite pleased with that. I did not think when I first read the challenge that I'd be able to get anywhere within it, let alone this far of actually procedurally generating things out. So what do I need to do next? So I need to create a list. I need to create more platforms, more platform prefabs, and I need to put that in as a list in the platform spawner so that it'll, instead of generating just this one each time, it'll generate one from a list or an array, not quite sure yet. But it'll spawn one of those each time randomly rather than this same platform each time. So I'll go with that. I'll probably stick with the same sort of thing. I'm just going to recolor these blue, green and yellow or something like that kind of thing, and then try and see that I'm getting different coloured ones still in the same line for now, moving along. And if I've got that far, then I'll come back and we'll see how we're at. And I'm back again. So this didn't turn out too tricksy in the end, so I've made some more prefabs. I've got my blue prefab, which I've labelled up. I made a green and a purple one as well. And I tied that into an array on the platform spawner. So, yeah, made a game object array and then tied this in. Now, I decided after playing it the first time round, and it was all working fine, that I wanted to enforce that the new platform created was always different than the last one. So I tied this into a while loop with the last platform and random platform being two different integers, which I set initially. I set up here, and then while the last platform is exactly the same as the random platform number, which it obviously will start off being, then generate a new number for random platform based on range between 0 and the prefab's length. So if that generated another 0 again, then that while loop would run again until that generated a different number, and then the last platform would be different to random platform, and so last platform would now be set as the new random platform. We would then instantiate that random platform and go on from there. Obviously first time through I forgot to put in my prefabs, but as it happens, it's all worked out quite nice. So we go along and we get different colour platforms being created each time. I've done this a few times, played this a few times, and that's always worked and always set, so I'm quite happy with that code. I also realised that there's obviously this death plane down here, which is sort of set, and I'd have to do something with this because obviously it's a fixed length of what it is. I'd have to make it massively long and hope the player never reached the end of it. It's going to be a fixed thing. Initially I thought, well, okay, I could instantiate new death planes along, and I thought, well, it must be a simpler reason, a simpler answer. So I thought maybe I'll stick it on the player as a child up to the player, until I realised that as the player dropped to his death, the plane would also drop to its death. So finally I figured I'd put it on the platform spawner, so that as the platform spawner moves along, so does the death plane. There it goes along, and the death plane will move along with it, which seemed like a nice, simple answer to keeping that death plane. It's big enough that whatever's going on the screen, it's going to be big enough to cope and deal with whatever's sort of dropping down. So, great. I now have simple platforms, different ones each time, being from the prefabs being created. So the next thing I think I want to do, my next sort of challenge, is to play with height. So I don't want them going in a constant line each time. I want to play with them height. So my thinking is I will need to create a random integer generator type thing on the y-axis for when it's transform.translating. The position, yes, the position, and then put that probably within a range of like a top to bottom minimum maximum sort of range, so that it can't. I don't want this to keep going on endlessly. If we grab the player and if for some reason all the numbers kept going up and 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 up, we'll sort of run out of back sky or whatever, and things look a bit weird. So I think I do want to try and keep it within a semblance of a range along here, so that it'll kind of, if it gets up so high, then it will start coming back down again. If it gets so low, it'll start coming back up again. I don't want to mess about with being able to go up endlessly forever if that happened. So that's my next little goal, to get little ups and down platforms happening, and I'll see you back after I've done that. Right, I'm back. So what I started out, what seemed like quite a simple solution, kind of got away from me a little bit. First thing I did, I tidied up my update, so I'm calling two methods up here instead. So this one's dealing with instantiating new platforms, and then was creating a new method to deal with moving spawner. I thought I'd start with something fairly similar to instantiating, sort of with the range and such, but that wasn't quite working out, especially when I tried to tag it into a clamped minimum maximum world height. I ended up finding that the platforms were spawning, they'd kind of get to the minimum world height, they'd just sort of end up staying there a lot and such. And the other thing I was doing wrong was I was sticking with this transform.translate. So I was sort of moving where the game object, the spawner, moving where it goes, putting it in that. So I was finding that I was translating it down by this amount each time, and I was getting very confused why it was going below the world height. And that took me a long time, too long, to realise that it was because I was translating it down, and that I need to actually do a transform new position, new vector 3, wherever it is in the x, that's already been based off what we've translated to this new height that we're setting it to. So it's not translating it down, it's just moving it to that number. And obviously keeping the z into a 0. I then also found that with doing this random range between so platform spawner range minimum maximum, so I say -4 to +4, once it got to say -4 for example, then it was staying at this sort of, when I was trying to clamp it still, I was staying at -4. Its range it was picking each time was much more reduced. It was more likely to pick -4 because it was finding a range based off where it is, which says -4, between -8 and 0, and a lot more, and then clamping that to the minimum world platform height, which might have been -4 for example. So it was clamping that, it was keeping it more often to -4. So if it was any number between -4 and -8, it was coming at -4. And if it was obviously a number above that, then it might go above it. There was a lot more chance of it being this -4 number. So I ended up coming up with these if statements rather than doing the clamping side of things, to say that if the height is at the minimum height, then pick a new height that's between the minimum height and the platform spawner range. So we're still not. I've got this platform spawner range set as a value to try and make sure the platforms don't generate at a range too large, then the player might be able to jump from. That's my thinking anyway. Through a bit of play testing, we'll find out. And obviously, same on the other end. If it's greater than or equal to the maximum world player height, maximum world platform height, then to put it at a number less than that, essentially. So that turned out as a fine success. So the first platform will generate in the same position each time at the 0 mark, because we instantiate things and move things afterwards, which I think is still fine, doesn't bother me. And then they'll randomly pick numbers beyond that and changing each time. I've got a debug.log on just so I could see what numbers were happening each time, to see that things were actually changing properly. And that's all happily fine. Grand. So, pause. So my next issue, I think, is to do with these game objects and the fact that I'm just going to end up in a whole thing filled with them, and I need to start deleting them so that they don't stick in the world forever. So I need to, there's a couple of ways I'm thinking of doing this. I can either set something on so that this platform just tries to destroy itself as soon as it's created, but with a delay time on of say 15 seconds, which should be plenty of time to get the player to go past. So that just might be a nice, potentially a nice simple method of it just self-deleting and things only last 15 seconds. Or I could tie in something to the platform spawner that whenever the platform spawner as it moves along, then there's a deleting sort of thing, so it knows where these, so it looks at these game objects and decides, oh right, well you are more than this further away, so you should now delete, or something like that. I should potentially look towards trying to group these platforms together as well, so they don't spawn us in the thing, but we'll see. So I'm going to play about with that and see what solution I come up to deleting game objects at these platforms as they go. Okay, see you in a bit. And so we're there. I'm quite excited about this, I have to say. When I started this morning, I did not really think I'd be able to achieve all of this. I was quite surprised how things came together, how much sort of knowledge and sort of learning I've sort of got already's come together for it. So what we have here is I made all the platforms being spawn into one group. And to do that, I made a new serialized field platform group, and in my instantiating method, I just changed that. So instead of just instantiating it, it's now instantiating it as a new game object, and putting that as the parent of the platform group. That was a bit. I went back to Argon Assault just to remember how we did that with the explosions and that were being created and being destroyed. That then also led me to the destroying side of things, and so by putting them all into that group, also needed to then check through each child in that group. That took me another little touch to Google just to kind of recognise how to search through that properly, and then check each child's positions on the X transform position minus less than or equal to the transfer position on the X minus a float, and then once that's the case, if that's the case, then destroy the child game object. I've managed to stumble on a nice number of 40 for me, which works out quite nicely, which means the platforms seem to be getting destroyed just as soon as I jump onto the next one right now, which is quite fun. Adds a little extra sense of excitement and danger. As you can see, the last one being destroyed and the next one coming along. For future-wise, if I was going to make more platforms and other sort of stuff, I need to tweak exactly how that number's generated, probably tie that number into more lengths of platforms themselves or something, or maybe a fixed number would be fine, but just further back we shall see. And same with generating of platforms to come. I think that the movement of the spawner will need to tie into what platform you've just created, but as of right now, just going through the procedural generation task, I think I've managed to tick all the boxes there on creating that to work. So I'm going to leave this video here. I might try and attack the next stage of it by adding more features later, but I'm going to leave that one here. Thank you very much, Game Dev, for this challenge. I've very much enjoyed it.